Hi and welcome to Film 3.uk Movie Recap. Today, we will be reviewing the movie Forrest Gump 1994, so if you're a fan of the film or just curious about it, stick around. In our video reviews, we may include some spoilers, so please be careful if you haven't seen the movie yet. The film Forrest Gump begins with a young Forrest sitting on a bench at a bus stop in Savannah, Georgia. He tells his life story to various strangers who come and sit with him on the bench. Forrest starts with his childhood, when he was born with a lower IQ than average and faced many challenges because of it. His mother, Mrs. Gump, always believed in him and encouraged him to do his best. She taught him how to run, and he soon became very fast. One day, Forrest was bullied by some kids on the school bus. He ran away from them, and they chased him. He ran into a field of tall grass and got lost. A kindly man named Bubba helped Forrest find his way back home. From then on, Bubba became Forrest's best friend. Bubba introduced Forrest to shrimp. Forrest loved shrimp, and he and Bubba started a shrimp fishing business together. They were very successful, but then Bubba was drafted into the Vietnam War. Forrest wanted to go with Bubba, but his mother said no. Forrest was very sad when Bubba left. He didn't understand why his best friend had to go to war. Mrs. Gump became ill and died soon after Bubba left. Forrest was all alone now. He didn't know what to do, so he just started running. He ran all the way across the country, from Alabama to California. When he reached California, Forrest decided to start running back home. Along the way, he met a lot of interesting people and had many adventures. He even met the President of the United States. Eventually, Forrest made it back to Savannah. He sat down on the bench at the bus stop and continued telling his story to the people who came and sat with him. In the second part of Forrest Gump, Forrest continues to recount his life story to the various strangers he meets while waiting at a bus stop in Savannah, Georgia. He talks about how he enlisted in the army during the Vietnam War and how he was shipped off to fight in the conflict. He describes the difficult conditions that he and his fellow soldiers had to endure, including the harsh weather and the enemy forces that were constantly attacking them. He also talks about how he met his best friend, Bubba, during his time in the army and how Bubba was killed in the war. Towards the end of this section, Forrest becomes emotional as he talks about how he was the only soldier from his platoon to make it out of the war alive. The third part of the film Forrest Gump 1994 begins with Forrest and his friends Bubba and Lieutenant Dan Taylor returning home from the war in Vietnam. Forrest is severely wounded and must spend several months recuperating in a hospital. When he is finally released, he returns to his home in Alabama where he meets and falls in love with a woman named Jenny Curran. Jenny is going through a tough time in her life and is constantly running away from her problems. Despite this, Forrest is drawn to her and the two eventually get married. They live happily together for a time, but Jenny's demons eventually catch up with her and she leaves Forrest, leaving him heartbroken. The fourth part of the film Forrest Gump begins with Forrest and his friends Bubba and Lieutenant Dan meeting at an army base. Forrest is about to be sent off to Vietnam, but he does not want to go. Lieutenant Dan convinces Forrest to go, and tells him that he will be there with him. Forrest and his unit are sent to Vietnam, where they are immediately thrust into the midst of battle. Forrest is terrified, but he manages to find some courage and helps his unit win a key battle. After the battle, Forrest is injured and is sent back to the United States. While he is recovering in the hospital, Forrest meets a young woman named Jenny. Jenny is also from Alabama, and the two of them bond over their shared homeland. Jenny eventually falls in love with Forrest, but she is also dealing with some demons from her past. The fourth part of the film ends with Forrest and Jenny getting married. They are happy for a time, but Jenny's demons eventually catch up with her and she leaves Forrest. The fifth part of Forrest Gump begins with Forrest and Lieutenant Dan meeting for the first time since the war. They spend some time catching up and reminiscing about their time in the service. Dan tells Forrest that he is now a successful businessman, but he still has nightmares about the war. Later, Forrest goes to visit his mother at the retirement home. She is happy to see him and they spend some time talking about his life. She tells him that he needs to find a good woman and settle down. Forrest then goes to see Jenny again. She is now married and has a son. They catch up and Jenny tells Forrest that she is happy with her life. She also tells him that she is glad he found somebody to love him. The movie ends with Forrest and Lieutenant Dan talking about life and what it means to them. The film cuts to black and white. A title card reads The Vietnam War. Forrest is seen sitting in a Vietnam War zone, holding a machine gun. He is shot in the buttocks and is brought back to the United States, where he is put in a hospital. While in the hospital, Forrest meets Lieutenant Dan Taylor, who has lost both of his legs in the war. The two become friends. Later, Forrest is seen on a bus. He meets a woman named Jenny Curran, who is also on the bus. The two become friends. The film cuts back to black and white. A title card reads 1975. Forrest and Jenny are seen walking on a beach. Jenny tells Forrest that she is going to marry a man named Forrest Gump. The film cuts back to color. A title card reads 1982. Forrest is seen running across the United States. He meets a man named President Kennedy. The film cuts back to black and white. A title card reads 1985. Jenny is seen at a nightclub. She is with a man who is not Forrest. Jenny tells Forrest that she is HIV positive. The film cuts back to color. A title card reads 1995. Forrest is seen sitting on a bench waiting for a bus. Jenny comes and sits next to him. She tells Forrest that she's going to die soon. The two say goodbye and Jenny dies in Forrest's arms. In the seventh part of the film, Forrest continues his journey across America, meeting new people and experiencing new things. He eventually finds himself in Louisiana, where he meets a woman named Jenny, played by Robin Wright. The two of them become close friends, and Jenny helps Forrest to see that life is worth living, even when it is difficult. The eighth part of the film Forrest Gump begins with Forrest and Lieutenant Dan meeting for the first time since the Vietnam War. Lieutenant Dan is now a successful businessman, but he is bitter and resentful towards Forrest for what he perceives as Forrest's lucky life. Forrest is still the same positive, optimistic person he always was, and he tries to reach out to Lieutenant Dan, but Lieutenant Dan will have none of it. The next day, Forrest goes to visit his mother at the nursing home. She is now very old and frail, and she doesn't even recognize him. Forrest is extremely upset by this, but he tries to stay positive and tells her about all the wonderful things that have happened to him since she last saw him. Later, Forrest receives a call from Bubba's widow, informing him that Bubba's mother has passed away. Forrest is once again reminded of his own mortality, and he begins to think about his own life and what he has accomplished. The film ends with Forrest sitting on a bench at a bus stop, reflecting on his life and all that he has been through. As the bus pulls away, he realizes that he is finally at peace with himself and everything that has happened to him. The ninth part of the film Forrest Gump begins with Forrest and Lieutenant Dan meeting back up in New York City. They discuss what has happened since they were last together, and then Forrest tells Lieutenant Dan about his plan to open a shrimp boat business. They go to visit Bubba's family to get started on the business, and then Forrest goes back to visit Jenny. Jenny is now living with her son and she is very sick. Forrest stays with her until she dies. Forrest Gump is sitting at a bus stop in Savannah, Georgia when he is approached by a woman named Jenny. Jenny is pregnant and she asks Forrest to take care of her child after she dies. Forrest agrees and Jenny dies in his arms. If you found the review enjoyable and wish to watch the movie, we've provided a link in the description where you can access it. If you appreciated the review, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Till the next time, bye.